Wow. So back, I guess it could tie back to white supremacy. So does that play a role of us not knowing these names? Because 95% of the names you just said, I never heard before. I never heard before at all. And every time I think about the first century, or they say, oh, go back to first century, I talk about church history, somebody white is involved and nobody black is involved at all. So I think even when somebody's on the street and you're talking to a brother or sister and you're trying to explain to them church history and you quoting John Calvin and you quoting all of these other theologians and they're looking like, what? I don't want to hear that. That's just, okay, you steady feeding me this white man stuff. So does white supremacy, I think it does play a role of that not being shown even in like some of these like high theological schools don't even teach you this type of stuff. Like, it's crazy. You got to go out the way or really be passionate about this to learn what's going on, which is just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. I mean, and that ties into, that is exactly why we haven't heard these names, because 1,500 years ago, the European church decided that these African and Asian Christians were like heretics. They were not real Christians. Now, that's not true, because they are. They'll tell you things like, you can even read church history books today, like written by like white American church historians, and they will even still tell you, oh, these people are not real Christians because they don't really believe that Jesus was actually fully human or he wasn't fully divine. And that is not true at all. If you go and read their own, but again, these same church history textbooks from today will say those things. They will condemn them as heretics. Even still in 2020, will still condemn these ancient African Christians as heretics. And that historian who wrote that book, I guarantee you they have like not even read the writings of that person that they're condemning as a heretic. They haven't even read them directly. They're condemning as a heretic just because that's been the Western history for 1,500 years to do that. So they're just repeating the same history they've been handed down. And so that's exactly why, to your point, why we have not heard the names of Georgius of Sagla or Timothy Ellerus or Narsai or, you know, all of these African and Asian theologians that I could just go on and on and on. They've written books and written theology in African and Asian languages, and we don't never hear about them, because that's exactly why we don't hear about it, because they're being put up as heretics or as like being not having value. And that's exactly why. So that's why it's so important for us to go back, and we have to get it. You know, we have to, like Sankofa, right? We have to, just like the West African Council, we have to go back and get and reconnect with, you know, our ancestry of Christianity that have been around since day one.
Right. Even when you try to do that, it's still hard. People still don't seem to get it, in my opinion. When you do that, they say, oh, they tied into like this conspiracy theory type stuff, and y'all infiltrating the church with all these people. Like, no, you infiltrating the church with these Africans. Like, nah, we don't need that. We got our theologians, so you better know who they are. You better read them and listen to them, and just be fine with that.
And I mean, it's the same, you know, we still, even if, like, you know, say, for example, in the Black church in America or other cultures, like, even if we've been cut off from this history, we still have dealt with the same kind of things, because, you know, for example, the Black church still deals with disrespect from a lot of, not all, but a lot of our white brothers and sisters in Christ, who will sometimes look down upon the Black church. You know, like there's even been, like, for example, like prominent white Christian leaders that have said things like, you know, the Black church preaching is shallow, or the Black church has not, you know, contributed anything theologically rich, right? And they will think only their particular style of preaching or their particular style of worship is the only valid way, when, again, Black preaching and Black worship is deeply theological and deeply profound, but it's in its own way. It doesn't come in maybe the 3-point, you know, 28-minute exactly every week sermon. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have a different cultural value, but that doesn't make it any theologically. I mean, I'll just give you an example about worship. You know, so often, I hate this. I really hate this. This is a pet peeve of mine, when people use the word liturgical, but what they mean is really, they just mean pedantic and long. That's really what they really are trying to say. Like, they'll say, well, I love worship that's more liturgical. I'm like, what, Negro spirituals ain't liturgical? That is liturgical. Liturgy just means worship. That just, I mean, like, so, you know, again, in many, for example, in many gospel songs, the lyrics are not as long as maybe many white churches where like a song is like 5 pages long of lyrics, you know what I'm saying? And like so often things like that, those cultural values that gets played into because, but again, from an African and African-American cultural value, truth and depth is felt in repetition and repeating things and remixing and kind of, you know, mixing the lyrics up. That's an African and African descended way of communicating theological depth. And just because one song has maybe only 4 lines to the whole song, and this song has 4 pages long, that doesn't make this one more deep or more theologically astute or anything like that. But you see those cultural value systems coming in and they become dominant. And it's the same. So even if we don't know this history, we deal with the same thing that these Christians in antiquity were dealing with. They said Jesus is one person, but he has one nature, but he's fully God and fully human. And the white Christian said, no, you have to say he's one person, but he has 2 natures. But see, again, in Greek, you can say there's one person and 2 natures, but in some of these other languages, in Ethiopian or Syriac or whatever, they don't have the same linguistic distinction. They don't mean the same thing. And so for them, they felt like the Europeans were actually being heretical. To them, they felt like they were saying, you're saying there's 2 different Jesuses. There's only one Jesus. And so, but because they had their own unique way of articulating what really none of our human minds can fully grasp, that Jesus was fully God and fully human, that they were condemned as heretics and their theology was seen as not valuable. And so, again, we still have that problem going on today where the dominant expression of Christianity is seen as the only valid one. And that's exactly why it's so important. When we look at this history, we see that it's not something that's only been happening now, but that's been going on since day one.
Right. That's why it's so important for people like for us to have people like you. I mean, true historians. I mean, in the faith. I mean, striving, working in the faith, man. And I just appreciate the work that you do. You can say